Okay class, in this demo we're going to create a nested hypervisor. So the first step, we need a virtual machine, and this virtual machine will become another Hyper-V host, but it will be a virtual Hyper-V host, unlike the physical Hyper-V host which we're working on here. Okay, so first step, let's create a new virtual machine. So we'll name it Hyper-V1. Okay, next, and generation 2 hardware, next. So because it's going to be a host, there are some requirements. So one of the first requirements is the RAM has to be not dynamic. It has to be statically assigned. Okay, so I'm going to make it quite large. So I'm going to take up 6 gigs of RAM. That way we can run a VM within the nested host. So next, at this point, we'll just leave it unconnected to any virtual networks, and we'll just make the hard disk 30 gigs. We'll browse, and we'll make sure that we install the trial version of Server 2016. And finish, and then we'll connect to the console, start the machine, and get the install process started. And you can see here in the latest version, an automatic checkpoint is created. Make this full screen. Next. Okay, so we're going to do the full desktop experience, meaning the full graphical user interface. And we're going to use Data Center. 30 gigs, next, and then it'll do its install process. During this time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another virtual hard disk. And this disk is going to be the location where we're going to store the virtual machines that will live on this nested hypervisor. So VHDX, we'll let it dynamically expand. We'll name it we'll just call it nested Hyper-V VMs. Okay. We'll just make it 100 gigs. And this is dynamically expanding by default. Finish. And let's attach that to the VM now. I could also create the virtual disk here. You can do it in multiple places. So I just went through Hyper-V to create it, but you can actually just create the new disk, and it'll automatically attach it here as well. So I'm just going to go browse to my disk, and I'm going to attach it. And we'll see where we're at the install process. Okay, so we're at 54%. I'm going to pause the. Okay, now that Server 2016 has been installed on the virtual machine, I've shut it down because there's some more requirements needed before we can actually successfully complete the nested hypervisor. So we're going to go into the settings of the virtual machine. And the first thing we need to do is go into the processors. There must be at least 2 processors for this to work. We also need to go into the network advanced features and enable MAC spoofing. And the last thing is we need to go and enable guest services. Now that we've done that, we'll start up the machine and we'll get into it. and start configuring. Okay, so let's put the password, create a password. Okay, so now what needs to be done is we need to just go and install the Hyper-V role. So we'll just wait for Server Manager to start up here. Oh, two things missing. So we should probably complete our post-installation tasks that I'm always talking about. So you can see that this isn't going to work, this name. So let's name it the same name as the virtual machine itself, so Hyper-V1. And actually, we can leave, we'll deal with the virtual networking after we install Hyper-V. So we can leave the PIPA address the way it is, but let's go and rename the machine and then do another reboot. I like to give a description, so it's a Hyper-V nested host, and then we'll name it the same as the VM, so Hyper-V1. Okay, reboot. Okay, so now we have full screen. Add the required features. Oh, we have a failure. And how come? Well, let's see why. The validation process found problems on the server to which you want to install the features. Okay. Hyper-V cannot be installed. The processor does not have the required virtualization capabilities. Interesting. Well, this error will stop us from installing the Hyper-V role. And how we fix this is we actually have to open up PowerShell on the physical host, and we have to run some commands. And what we need to do is we need to expose virtualization extensions on the VM. And what this does is, in essence, it just allows the nested virtual machine to be a hypervisor. Okay, so we just missed a step, so we'll hit OK, and we'll cancel this, and we'll minimize this virtual machine, and we'll bring up PowerShell on the Hyper-V host itself. Okay, so let me just make this a bit bigger. I like green as my screen text. Okay, so let's first run this command. We're going to get -vm processor, VM name, so it's this virtual machine, the Hyper-V or Hyper-V1. and then we're going to do a pipe. So we're putting two commands together in one, and we're going to get a full list. So FL is full list and everything. And this is going to bring up some information about the process. So what we're looking for is here, expose virtualization extension. So it is not exposed, so we need to turn this into true. So once we do that, we should be able to install the Hyper-V role on the virtual machine. So the next command is set VM processor. VM name Hyper-V1. Expose tab complete virtualization extensions true. So this is now going to allow nested hypervising. Oh, what's the problem? Okay, so let's take a look at this error. Failed to modify device processor. Oh, okay. Well, I know right off the bat what the problem is. It can't do any of these changes to this processor with the virtual machine running. So let's turn it off. So we're going to do a shutdown, graceful shutdown. And it should just take a minute and not even. Okay, so that's done. So let's go back in and we'll run this command again, and it should just be done. Okay, so we can run the other command again just to confirm it worked. And you can see here that expose virtual is now true, and that's what we're looking for. So let's start the VM back up again. Okay, it's the wrong screen. Let me try that again. Okay, let me just okay, now that I've gotten that sorted out, let's go back and add the Hyper-V role now. And there's no network adapter currently attached, so there's nothing we can select here. Okay, so now here at this stage, we've got default save locations for both the virtual hard disks and the Hyper-V the virtual machines themselves. So let's change this. We attached that disk earlier, that 100 gig disk to store all the VMs on. So let's go into disk management and initialize and format that disk. Bring it online, initialize, and then we'll format it. Call it V for virtual machines, and I'll name it VMs. Now we can go create a directory, couple directories. Okay, so now we'll point to those directories. So the first one's the hard disks. And the other one is the actual virtual machine file. So we'll select virtual machine. There we go. So now by default, any new VMs we create will just automatically be stored in these locations. Okay, so we need the management tools. We'll restart if required and install, and it will probably need a reboot. This shouldn't take too long, but I'll pause the video here. Okay, so the server is rebooted and it's just finishing the install of Hyper-V. So if we go into the new directories we created here, within here we need to actually have some ISOs, some install media if we want to install a virtual machine within this nested hypervisor. So let's just create a new folder called software. And at this point, of course, we're not connected to anything, so we can't browse any shares. I can't go get an ISO file from somewhere on my network, nor could I go to the internet and download anything. So we need to fix this too now. Okay, so looks like Hyper-V's done its install. And let's yeah, it says there's something new in administrative tools, and if I right click here, I can just pin this to the taskbar. And now if I open up Hyper-V Manager, here we are. We now have a nested hypervisor. And this is the actual server version of Hyper-V. So it's not the Windows 10 client version. And if I go into Hyper-V settings, you can see that there's a few differences between the client and the server Hyper-V. Okay, so first things first, we need some install media. So we need to get network connectivity. So let's minimize the virtual machines console here, and let's take a look at the virtual switch manager on our physical host. Okay, so we did create a NAT switch previously, and this NAT switch was on the 192.168.3 network. So we can confirm the network settings by just opening up PowerShell here, doing an IP config all. So if I look here, you'll see that there it is. So this is my NAT switch, and this is the networking. So this is the IP address of the physical host. Physical host acts as the NAT router, so it's translating the external IP address. So I want to put my nested virtual environment behind this route NAT as well. So what we need to do is first we need to connect this virtual nested hypervisor to that NAT network. Okay, so let's go into settings and just put it on the NAT switch, hit apply, and OK. So since there's no DHCP on this, we actually have to go back into the virtual machine itself and go and set a static IP. And I like to get in the habit of naming this. So in this case, I'm going to actually name it the subnet. So 192.168.3.0 CIDR 24. Oh, it doesn't allow me to have that slash. So let me just do 192.168.3.0. Okay, so go in here and we'll set the static IP. Class C subnet. Default gateway is the host, so 192.168.3.254. And currently there's no DNS server on this network. If you had a DNS server, you would obviously put the DNS IP address here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put 8.8.8.2 8, which is Google's DNS servers, just so I can get out to the internet if needed. Okay, so it automatically sees the network, and this exclamation mark should disappear. There we go, it's gone. So I can actually test connectivity now from this machine to the outside world. So we're pinging Google, and I can do a trace RT to google.ca and see where my hops are. So yeah, it's going through my physical host, then through the physical host's default gateway. So my physical host is acting as a default gateway on the 3 network to my nested hypervisor. Then it's going out to my physical host's default gateway, which then gets out to the internet through these IP addresses. So TELUS, and then finally gets to Google, or the hop before Google. Okay, so that's all good. Now I should be able to browse to my host. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go make a share on my host so that I can grab this server 2016 trial and copy it over. So that should be this PC, and then into software and server 2016 trial ISO. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to share this level here, the software level, if it's not done so already. And it looks like it's already shared, and I'll just see the permissions on it. Okay, so everyone has access. Well, you need the credentials to get in. So here, now I should be able, from my Hyper-V nested host, I should be able to browse to that location. So we just open up a new window here, and it should just be //RPSC, which is the computer name, /software. And this doesn't work, probably because DNS is not working right now, so I'll just go via IP address. Okay, so now it asks for credentials, so I'm going to put in the credentials for this PC. And we're in. So I can now just grab this Server 2016 trial, copy that, and dump it into my software share here. And let's just take a few seconds over the network. And once that's done, we can go ahead and create the first VM. But what if we want that VM to also be on this NATed network so it can communicate with both the nested hypervisor plus the physical hypervisor and any VMs that live on that other hypervisor that are also connected to the NAT switch? Well, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to go to Virtual Switch Manager on the nested hypervisor and create a virtual switch. So it'll be an external switch, and we'll create that, and it's automatically what's going to end up happening here. So let's take a look at the network settings of the nested hypervisor, and we can see here that we've got this switch, okay? And we set the static IP on it to .3.2, right? Okay, okay. Now we'll just minimize this, and what we'll do is we'll create this new external switch. So we'll just call it the 192.168.3.0 network. Apply. You could just leave the name external. It doesn't matter, as long as you know where it's routing you. So now let's go back and see what's happened to our network settings. As you can see, a new virtual Ethernet switch adapter has been created. So what's happened is this adapter here has actually turned into a Hyper-V extensible virtual switch. So what's happened is this is actually now it's created a new adapter, and it's taken those settings in this Ethernet, which is a virtual Ethernet adapter. And if I go in here, it's taken those settings and put it in here. So now that we have this virtual Ethernet adapter, we can now start plugging in our virtual machines to this virtual switch, which will allow these new virtual machines access out and to connect to other devices on this network. So let's go create the first VM within the new nested hypervisor host. So let's just take a look one more time here. So I'll just bring up the properties here one more time. So what's happened is this is the switch, okay? So this is the virtual switch. So what's happened is this has been created. Just imagine it's virtually been plugged into this. And any new machine that we add to this virtual switch will virtually plug into this switch. So if you can try to think of it as a physical switch, this is a physical switch. Well, it's virtual, but think of it physically if you want. And this is plugged in, and any new machine that's connected to this plugs in, and we'll do that right now. So let's create a new virtual machine. We'll name it server 1. Connect it to the only switch available. Now we have the ISO file in the software share. We'll connect to it and then boot up. And there we are. We've successfully created a nested hypervisor host and installed a virtual machine on that host. So once the operating system gets installed here, we would then give this machine a static IP on the 192.168.3 network, and then it would be able to talk to all the other machines in the network. So that's it for this demo. Till next time.